Welcome to the 86 Reason podcast by Over Easy Office, and I'm here with a very old friend and a restaurant operations guru, Steve Uhr. It is a pleasure to have you on the show. Where are you today?
Oh man, it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm at the Occidental in Washington, D.C., which is the sixth restaurant that we've opened here in the district. We opened March of 2025. So it was a interesting situation. There was this banquet server or something that worked next door at the Willard, and he wanted to branch out on his own, so he kind of built a hotel, or at the time was a hotel, in the space I'm sitting in, and it was the Occidental Hotel and Restaurant. That was in 1906, and ran the restaurant through the 20s, and there was this family that came down from New York that bought it from him, and it literally ran continuously until the 70s, through both world wars and Prohibition, and so shut down in 76 or so. It reopened in 82, I think, by a chef named Jeff Boobin, who was one of these local icons that, all these restaurateurs in DC, chef owners, most of them cut their teeth with him at some point.
Okay.
So they reopened briefly after COVID, and didn't make it, unfortunately. Downtown's a little rough still here in DC. Just from business, it's safe.
Sure.
Despite what they say on the news, but government, just office hasn't really come back. So we had this opportunity to take over. So we signed the lease in end of 23. Did a full renovation. We hired a magical designer named Ken Falk, who came in and did the redesign, and we opened in March, and it's been gangbusters, man. It's got that retro feel of all the restaurants we did. This was a really good swan song for us here in this market. We do Bananas Foster Tableside. We have prime rib.
The old classics.
Oysters half shell, crab cocktail. We have an awesome crab cake, which we did so much R&D for. I had to drive all over Maryland and find the best crab cakes and bring them back to the chefs and let them dissect them and then try and recreate them. And it's a special place.
That's really cool. And just for the listeners out there, so Steve, your official title, are you director of restaurants? And you work for the Steve and STARR group, which we'll get into, or STARR Restaurants, SRO. Yeah. I know there's been iterations of the name, right?
So officially it's director of new restaurant openings.
So you get to endure the most interesting and intriguing level of pain, which is always the hardest part, no? Or is it the funnest part?
Yeah, I'm full masochist. I'm not just psychotic, but just a masochist. I left restaurants in 2018 because I was over it. I was kind of burnt out. I'd opened a lot of restaurants with a different operator, and I was I'm never opening another restaurant. I got into the beverage, distribution business, which we can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
And I was I'm just not doing it. And then I came back, and a friend of a friend was opening a restaurant on 14th Street, and they're they really need some help. I went for friends and family, and it was a shit show. The food was great, but the front of house, you could just feel that frenetic crazy, and not in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they called me the next day. They're will you help them out? And I'm man, we'll meet the guy. Let me go meet the guys, the owner and the chef, and we'll talk about it. And by the end of the conversation, they're can you start today? I'm no, I can't start today. I got some stuff to do, but we could talk about tomorrow potentially. Let's talk numbers, and then we'll get there. So I ended up coming back and consulted with him for 6 weeks. I hired a GM, got the place up and running, and
and then you found yourself right back into the belly of the beast.
Yeah. I mean, no. Actually, no. That's when I went into distribution.
Well, so let's start from the top, Steve.
Okay.
So, how did this all happen? I mean, where you tell me about where you grew up, and what was that first restaurant job you had? Was it did you find it, or did the industry find you?
So, I thought that question might come up, and there's probably a twofold answer. So I grew up outside of Philadelphia. I was lucky that my parents did okay. They were together. My mom cooked like every night. We had like, we had literally like a 2-course dinner every night. It was like soup, salad, or like grapefruit. My mom loved to serve like grapefruit. And then we would have like a protein, a starch, and a vegetable. Like this was like every night,
That's nice.
It's 5 nights a week, whatever. We'd go out a couple nights a week, and I had the chance to experience like some decent restaurants back then, and I didn't know. I always watched my mom cook. I was always interested. And when we went to the Jersey Shore, I was probably about 14 or 15, and I'm not a beach guy. I can't lay on the beach. I'm like, I need to do something. So I was like walking around Margate and Ventnor, and I walked into one place, and I'm like, I'm looking for a job, and it was called 2 Cents Plain. So I started scooping ice cream and washing dishes there. And then later that summer, I went into some other place called Melissa's. I don't know if it's there still or not, in Margate. And they're like, oh, we need somebody today. And I'm like, okay. And somehow I ended up cleaning soft shell crabs.
Really?
They showed me one, and they're like, all right, here, you're good. I was like, okay.
Go.
And then I guess what happened, and there's a lot of scumbags in our industry, but what happened, I guess the prep guy called out, right? So they needed somebody. So I go back the next day, they're like, oh, we don't have any work for you. And I'm like, what the hell?
Wait, so you went to Melissa's, and within a day they brought you in, chewed you up, spit you out?
Yeah, maybe I did the Melissa's thing before too, and then maybe I got the bug, and I was like, I want to do this, and then I went to the ice cream place. I can't remember. I mean, it was like, I don't know. I don't remember. It was too
many restaurant openings since then.
Exactly. I'm like PTSD. And then when I was 20, I was overseas. I was making my way from Israel to London, and I was at some actually no. When I was in Israel, I left a kibbutz, and I was walking around Tel Aviv, and I walked into this place that said "Help Wanted," and I went in, and they were looking for a dishwasher and somebody to make paninis, and the days leading up to that, I was literally working, like carrying cinder blocks up like 5 flights of steps for like 15 shekels an hour, which was like $5 American. And I see this help wanted sign, so I go in, they speak English, and they're like, yeah, we're looking for somebody to make paninis and wash dishes. And it was the same pay rate. I'm like, oh, I'm in. And then they even gave me a beer at the end of the shift. So I'm like, oh, I'm totally into this. And then so I did that for a while, and I shit you not, the place was called Bar Mitzvah. I swear to God.
Really?
Yeah. And so that that coupled with this great meal that I had in Rome, where I'm thinking like, I got to learn how to make stuff like this, was really like, there's a couple different hooks, but it got me for sure.
And then so did you ever go to formal training, Steve, or did you ever go to school specifically for either business management or hospitality?
Yeah, both. So when I came back to the States, I started working, a friend of my dad's, I got a server job at this place in Conshohocken called, it was a seafood place. Big Fish.
Don't you love when it's so long ago that you can't even remember?
Oh my God. Yeah, it's like, yeah. So it's called the Big Fish, and I'd never served before. And I went in there and I said that when I was a student at University of Maryland in College Park that I worked at Houston's. Totally lied. And they're like, oh my God, Houston's, they have the best training program. Like, you got to come work here. And I was like, great, so I
I'll build it for
there's
you.
a server, yeah. And I felt like I had dined out enough. Like, I know what good service was. Like, I know how to treat people and what people want, so it felt natural. And so I did that for a bit. And then a friend of my dad's, you're South Jersey?
Yes.
Do you remember a restaurant? Did you ever go to a place, I think it was in Marlton or something, called Barnacle Ben's?
I've heard of it, but I don't think I've ever been there, but I've definitely heard of Barnacle Ben's.
So Benji was a friend of my uncle's, and he opened a seafood place with the same name in Conshohocken near the Big Fish. So I went there and was working front of house a bit, and I was like, I want to learn how to cook or do something or whatever. So the chef's name was Chuck, and he let me work like garde a couple days a week. So I was like shucking oysters and clams and like, doing some prep. And I was like, I need to like really learn how to do this. So at that point, I decided to go to Johnson & Wales.
Okay.
At the time, they had a campus in Charleston, and a friend from high school, I went to go visit him in Memphis, and we went to New Orleans and went to Mardi Gras, and I like felt the hospitality of the South. So while Johnson & Wales' main campus was in Providence, they had a satellite in Charleston, so I ended up going there.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was in this old cigar factory. They didn't have a campus, but they had, a 2-floor building in this, two floors in this cigar factory where they did culinary and hospitality and stuff like that. So I did the full associates in culinary, moved back to Philly with the intention of going back to Charleston, and ended up working as a line cook at this place in Manayunk called Jake's.
Oh, Jake's is a classic Manayunk spot.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, this was like, it was, like our chef came from La Croix to Four Seasons, and I mean, it was all the guys I worked with went on to like be chefs and restaurateurs, and I was like the weak guy,
coming
like
in fresh.
I was like the greenest guy. I didn't know how to cook. I thought I did. They don't teach how to cook in culinary school. They just teach you about food,
Yeah.
But there's really good.
I was going to ask you, Steve, and even back then, was Charleston such a I'm sad to say and embarrassed to say I still haven't been to Charleston. I know it is one of the culinary epicenters of the South and of American cuisine. Was it like that back then? Was it really like a representation of Southern cuisine and the way it is today?
I think so. Yes. Yeah. To answer your question, yes. Like Magnolia's was there then, which is like an iconic Charleston restaurant.
Okay.
I also worked there as a prep cook for like 2 days. I didn't know the College of Charleston students were on vacation, or on spring break, so they hired me, and then they're like, oh, we have no hours. But I ended up going to this place called Union Hall, which was this like modern Italian restaurant right on East Bay Street. The chef was a guy named Brett McKee, who was like a baller. Like, again, these guys, these cooks were so much more skilled than me, and it just was like an honor, kind of like to be in their presence. And Brett was crazy, man. I mean, he was the kind of chef. He had the mohawk, and he would go out in the dining room and like do I don't know how he did it. Like, would chug a beer up, like doing a handstand, like a headstand, and would like chug a beer. I swear to God, it was like the craziest shit. And when it was like a little bit slower at the beginning of the night, like the guys would like get these pans rocket hot and just pour like wine in them to get the flames going. I mean, it was that kind of thing. Yeah, but we would go out after, and we would do all the things that restaurant people do after work. And,
right, like reading books and sharing poems,
poetry. Zen diagram. Stuff like that. No, but but yes, it was definitely a culinary destination. I mean, they had like cheap labor there. You had Citadel, you had the College of Charleston, you had Johnson & Wales. So the restaurateurs there were like, hiring all these kids, and nobody knew how to do anything, and they just like taught us, and it was pretty cool.
And Steve, back then, how were your parents? Were they supportive in your decision to go down this path? I mean, I got to imagine it was a battle, right? Because it sounds like your parents loved food, but, most parents who love food and don't necessarily love the idea of their kids being in restaurants. Like, how do those conversations go?
Not great. Like, I was living at home when I was working at Jake's, and I would go in, like, so I was like the entremetier, you know, the guy that like works veg, and everybody had to prep their own station. So we had a ravioli on the menu, so I'd like make the dough and make the ravioli, and I was not very fast at all. So I had to go in like a couple hours before my scheduled time to make sure my station was set. And I wasn't getting paid for that time, you know?
Right.
And my dad, and you know, if I was scheduled at 3, I'm going in at noon to like do my prep, like mince my shallots and, you know, chop my garlic and make raviolis and blanch veg and whatever. And my dad would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm working." He's like, "But you're not getting paid." I'm like, "Well, this is part of it. You know, you cut your teeth, and this is part of it." He's like, "I'm going to call the Pennsylvania Labor Relations Board." And
oh my God!
I'm like, "No, God, no, don't." And
it sounds like your dad could have been a writer for Eater like 30 years before the publication even came out.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So. And I didn't get it. Like, you know, we would do a family meal then, and like my station would be half set, and I would go make family meal, and I'd go like sit outside in the alley, and the chef would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm eating something, chef." He's like, "Your station's not set up. Get the fuck back inside. Like, what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, damn,
this is how we learn, right?" This is how it was. Steve,
yeah.
like, I had no idea that you had worked in the back of the house. Like, how many years did you work in the back of the house before you decided to make that leap into wearing a suit? Like, or was the transition more like of a gradual one?
So it was 2 years, I think, and I was going to go back to school, and I was going to go to the College of Charleston and finish my bachelor's. You know, I was like in my mid-20s at that point. You know, the female to male ratio at College of Charleston was about 7-1.
Okay.
So I'm
perfect.
like, I'm going back there, and
back to
Charleston's a great town. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I ended up getting this job at Jake's, and I was like punching way above my weight. It was a great restaurant, and I was learning a lot. So I ended up staying and ended up enrolling at Drexel. So I finished my degree in hospitality and business at Drexel while, you know, sort of cooking on the side. We had to do an externship at Drexel. So there was a friend that worked at the Radnor Hotel out on the main line, and I went for an interview, and I waited, like the hotel GM, like made me wait for like, you know, 2 hours before like I met with him. And he's like, "Well, you passed the first test. You know, you're patient and you're diligent." And he's like, "We're going to teach you confrontation management." You know, and I'm like, "Oh wow, that sounds cool." You know, and so I ended up doing like an internship there at the Radnor Hotel. That was the first time I had an opportunity to manage, and I literally knew nothing.
Wow. And
when I went back
hotels
to school,
are such a different beast, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
It's I can only imagine if that's your first foray into management. I mean, these are guests that don't leave. Like, I can't even imagine what that was
and
like.
It was not, they called themselves like the Four Seasons of the main line, but like, and I'm sure it's under different ownership now, and I'm sure it's much nicer. But I remember they invited me in for brunch, and they had this big like champagne brunch thing, and there were things like spelled wrong on the buffet.
Yeah,
and like
the good stuff.
Like, what am I like? Gravlax is spelled wrong. What are you doing here? But it was a good opportunity, so
yeah,
I did it, and I ended up staying with the company. They owned a restaurant. It was right by Villanova University, so they opened another place called the Wild Onion.
Okay.
So I ended up managing there and cooking there. Like, I managed 2 days a week, and I cooked 1 day a week. I had to work 30 hours to keep my insurance while I was back at Drexel. And I would cook on Fridays, and I would run a special, and it would be like a 3-pan pickup, and I would just totally put myself in the fucking weeds because people were buying it, and I was like, literally would just bury myself every Friday, just because. I mean, that's like what you know.
Oh, I mean, you were having
things aren't
fun
on fire.
It's
not fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after Drexel. I interviewed with the Four Seasons because I was going to get into management and do that for a couple years. And then the plan was to go stage in Europe after that, in France or Italy. And so I met with the Four Seasons. They said, you can't have any facial hair. So I eliminated myself from being a candidate. And I met with STARR Restaurants, and I met with a restaurateur named Neil Stein. Neil and Steven were like the prominent restaurateurs at the time. Neil had the striped bass and rouge and blue.
And those two doggies, right? Those
What's
two
that?
terriers or whatever didn't he have a couple bull terriers or something
Oh,
that
yeah,
he would walk
yeah,
around the city?
And it's weird because like we had to, we had a meeting, and then he had to cancel, and then we had another meeting, he had to cancel again, and finally we were about to meet, and I'm driving from my parents' house in Narberth, and was on my way, and literally my timing belt went, like on Conshohocken State Road, so I had to call and cancel. I'm like, this was not meant to be, So I ended up having an opportunity with STARR Restaurants, and I opened Alma de Cuba in November of 2000.
Great restaurant.
No, sorry, March of 2001.
I missed that place. I gotta be honest, Steve.
I loved it.
I missed that place.
Doug
It was
Rodriguez
one
was
of the
such a-
sexiest restaurants that I've ever been in, and I still think about those smoked marlin tacos and
Oysters Rodriguez, Vaca Frita. Oh man,
and
so
he
good.
was one of the first. Him and Guillermo Pernod were the two guys that really introduced ceviche to Philadelphia.
Totally.
I feel like so.
You know what, that reminds
How long
me, I
did
think
you work at Alma?
I interviewed with Guillermo too, and Michael Domkowski, and he's like, I'm looking for a manager, but there's nowhere to go. There's no growth. Like, he's the chef, I'm the owner, like
Right.
the GM basically. And they were great guys, but there was just no real opportunity there. So I opened Alma in May. I moved to Morimoto and opened Morimoto Philly in November of 2001 with the GM that had opened Alma. We had a 4-person team to open the restaurant. The restaurant ended up being dinner only, so they're like, do you want to go over to Morimoto? And I was like, yeah, big time. Like,
Absolutely.
I was really...
And that was a big deal back then.
Oh my God, it was huge. It was his first restaurant after he left Nobu in New York. And, when Steven, I didn't know much about restaurants or about STARR, but it just seemed like a lot of, glitz and glam. And, but then he started partnering with Doug and Morimoto and Alfred Portale, and I'm like, all right, this guy's like, the food is serious in his restaurants. So, and then to open Morimoto, like I'd never had a raw oyster prior to then. I knew nothing about sake. It was an incredible opportunity, and it was crazy. Everybody was doing omakase, and this was in 25 years ago, and people were spending $120 for food, without just because it's like it's Morimoto,
Of course.
And it was incredible. So then after that, I went to Budokan, which was like, iconic at that point. We were down a manager, I think at Budokan and Morimoto, so it's like splitting time. And then I heard, that we were opening a new restaurant with Marcus Samuelson, called Washington Square. So I went there as the beverage manager, and opened that restaurant with Marcus. Things moved along very quickly, and before my dad got sick, I became the GM there. So it was like in about 4 years or so, I went from 4.5 years maybe from junior manager to GM. And my dad got sick and I ended up leaving, but it was probably about 5 years and 3 openings with STARR in the first stint. I'm on stint number 3 now.
Oh my gosh! All right. Okay. So you take a step back, and then
So I was going to go back to the kitchen, but
Was that always your plan? You thought you would end up going back to back of the house?
I did. But then after things, progressed so quickly, my first time with STARR, I just was like, I'm going to stick with this for a while. I got a chance to dabble in beverage at Washington Square, and that was something that I was really interested in. I got a chance to work with a really awesome wine guy at Tangerine, a guy named Jason Ferris. And once I started to kind of get that little taste of the beverage side of it, I wanted to stick with it.
Incredible. And then, so Steve, we met, interestingly enough, I think it's over 20 years ago you and I met, when you were the GM of Sweelan at the Borgata.
Yeah, so that was
after... And I
after,
remember when...
Yeah, I mean, my father, passed in March of 06. And then, so I wanted to I was maybe going to move to Chicago, but, 2-hour flight, whatever. So the opportunity to work with Susanna at the Borgata came up. She was looking for a GM, and it was dinner only, 5 days a week, James Beard award-winning chef.
The dream schedule.
Like I could go back and see my mom, and so I ended up doing that, and and then there was the plan was they were going to get rid of one of the private rooms and put it in a sushi bar, which is my experience attracted me to them with Morimoto and stuff. And then there was the fateful Meter Maid incident, where it all came crashing down.
Meter Maid. What happened with that one? I never heard this.
So Susanna allegedly assaulted a meter maid outside of her restaurant in Center City, and she was building a restaurant on the main line, but something happened there. And then next thing you know, Joe Lupo and Bob Bogner and the guys decided to terminate, and Victor Tiffany decided to terminate her contract, I guess. So.
Oh my gosh! So this was like social media canceling before social media canceling was a thing.
Yeah. Or I think she said that I'm going to open this restaurant, a mile from my house, and I'm not going to be down here anymore. I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of different rumors. I closed the restaurant, which was rough, and I've never done that before. And then the Puck guys were nice enough to bring me over there.
That's awesome. And just in Susanna Fu's defense, who, by the way, to this day had the best duck dish I think I ever ate, which is that tea smoked duck, was insane, that dish. But in her defense, there's been a couple times where I've considered the throwing fisticuffs with Philadelphia meter maids myself. So
she's still out and about. I mean, I've seen her at Borromini, a handful of times when I was spending time up there.
That's incredible.
She's retired, and she's good. She survived. Thank God there wasn't social media then. Can you imagine?
Oh, I can imagine. So you end up working at Puck.
Old lady chef assaults meter maid.
Well, I mean, I guarantee you, Susanna knows her way around cleaver and all kinds of sharp kitchen things.
I never even thought about that.
So when you go to AC, all right, because it seems so. Really, the formal years, the foundation of your management happens in Philly, and then you move to AC, and you're working within. And I worked there, right? I got a chance to see what the belly of the beast of the Atlantic City, and a lot of what let's say the structural formalities of working within a corporate Atlantic City union environment was. I mean, you finally make a move to go to DC after that, right?
Yeah, I lived in Brigantine, and I was just like kind of over it. It's a lot, I wasn't a gambler, but it's just like going into that environment every day, with the bells and the whistles and the union, and it was a lot, it was in that
the smoking and the darkness, the lack of sun, casinos, and I remember just I still hear it, like the ding ding ding, like the the slots, those sounds, they often, I mean, they still traumatize me.
Yeah, and then asking like a waiter to bus a table, it's like, well, it's not my job, it's the busser's job, and I'm like, we're taking care of people, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, a friend that I worked with at Alma in Washington Square moved to DC to work for Jose Andres. He was the chef at Zaytinya. So. I interviewed at the time for a beverage position, and I'm like, I'm not going to move to DC for a beverage position. And then I went back to DC, I went back to AC, and their director called me and said, the GM at Jaleo has to suddenly leave. Would you be interested in that? And I was like, maybe when, what's the timing? And they're like tomorrow. And I was like, I can't, like the puck guys.
It's always tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Like, we didn't talk last week? You had to move last week. And I was like, the puck guys were so good to me. They brought me over after Susanna closed, and I have to give them, and it's such a tough market there. I'm like, I got to give them like a month or whatever. And they were very understanding. And then the GM at Zaytinya, I guess, put in her notice. And then they're like, well, what about Zaytinya? That's a little bit more on your timeline. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. So I ended up moving to DC in 2008 to work with Jose, my friend Mike, who was the chef. And I was with Jose for probably 3 years. And then went to Blue Dog Tavern.
Which is like an insane volume restaurant, right?
Blue Dog?
Yeah.
Zaytinya was volume. Zaytinya was volume. We did like 12 million back then,
Wow, yeah.
Blue Dog was a little bit higher end, more refined. It was like the first DC, second, I guess. Nora was the first, was the second, like kind of farm to table, like Path Valley, Farms was on the menu, and Rosetta Farm, all the purveyors, they were like one of the first DC restaurants to put all the purveyors on the menu. It was in the Park Hyatt, non-union, and it was great. I loved it. And a friend, same guy that was working for Jose, called me and was like, I want to make a change. So I called this recruiter, Jeffrey Call. You probably know Jeffrey Call.
Yes, of course.
So I called Jeff, and I'm like, listen, I got a buddy who's super talented. He's looking for a GM job. Or, I'm sorry, a chef job. And he's like, I'm not looking for a chef, but I'm looking for a GM. And I'm like, no, I'm good. He's like, no, you should talk to these guys. I'm like, no, I'm good. He's like, no, you should talk to him. He's like, it's a confidential search, but it's Jean-Georges at the W. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, I knew the GM. I'm like, oh, where's so-and-so going? And he had to scramble. He's like, oh, well, he's building the bench, and, they want to do some more in D.C. Well, turns out
you were replacing
him. Yeah. So I ended up going there. I was like, Jean-Georges, like, yeah, of course. So it was really between like Puck, from a service standpoint, it was more Puck and Jean-Georges, where they were much more service driven. Than, it's not a knock on STARR at the time, but they were a little bit more refined. Certainly more formal restaurants. So that's where I really got into service a lot, and loved being on the floor. Loved driving service, interacting with guests, supporting the team. And then I moved back to Philly for a minute, and then came back to DC and worked for the guy that. Go ahead.
No, I want to touch on. I mean, you've spent plenty of time in Philly. You've spent plenty of time in DC. If you were going to choose a market to open a restaurant between those two, from your perspective, which do you think would be the place where you would open?
Definitely Philly.
Okay, I didn't expect that. How come?
No doubt about it. DC, well, a lot of things have changed in DC since the time that I've started working here and living here. Mostly for worse in terms of like operators. Tip minimum wage got eliminated. With so much development, rents are
through the roof now,
out of control. The labor force here is very challenging. Like, one of the things that I found about Philly is you have so many people that are aspiring, actors, musicians, artists. Like, there's that whole culture in Philly, and a lot of those people end up working in restaurants because you have the flexibility. You can make good money.
Yeah. Put on a great show.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's theater, what we do, right? So the pool of people I found to be better from a service standpoint in Philly. Here, I mean, you have lawyers and lobbyists and a lot of very expensive private schools like Georgetown and GW, and they're not going to they're not going to take $15 host positions or whatever it would have been at the time. Much more now. So I think it's easier to staff it. I think the rents are lower. The wages generally in Pennsylvania are lower than here in DC. I think the chance to have a successful restaurant and a profitable restaurant, which is very challenging, as we know, would be better there.
So leading into that, Steve, so I remember in my younger years that I always thought my goal in life would be to be a director of restaurants at Steve & STARR restaurants. I mean, that to me was the coolest thing. When I would see guys go from restaurant to restaurant, first I thought, man, how cool is that they're overseeing multiple locations. Then I always thought how cool it was that you get to learn multiple menus and affect, the operations at multiple places. But I don't think it's as glamorous as I ever actually made it out to myself in my head. Like, as a director of restaurants, and especially in your role, which is helping open new restaurants, what are some of the maybe unseen difficulties that maybe people like GMs and managers overhype or fantasize? Like, I'm sure it's a ton of pressure.
What? Can you repeat that? It just kind of broke up a little bit.
Yeah, I was just to say. So, what are some of the unseen challenges and things that maybe GMs or managers don't realize, like pressure or having to juggle different concepts? Like, what kind of things don't we see from the outside that make being a director of restaurants difficult?
So I think my time when I worked for Michael Schlauer, I worked for Schlauer for 5 years after my second stint with STARR and before I got into beverage. And that, I think, was, I started as a GM when we had one unit, and then when we opened our second, I became director, and then we opened a third, a fourth, and a fifth. I think the biggest challenge is, you don't know. It's hard to figure out where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. If you're working for like a smaller company like that was, we didn't have a lot of infrastructure. It was a chef owner, we had a CFO, a couple, corporate chef, corporate pastry chef, and me overseeing this market. I had a counterpart in New England, and you don't. It's hard to take your GM hat off when you're in that role.
Yes. Because
when you're in the restaurant, you're like, you want to run the restaurant, but you have a GM that you need to trust to like run the restaurant. So you're trying to like not get in the way, and not micromanage anyone, because you want the management team to manage the hourly team. And for me, that transition was hard because I didn't really know. I'm not a guy that like sits in front of a computer and like stares at numbers all the time. I want to be in service and be a part of the guest experience, and so that part of it was a tough transition for me. And then when we got up to 5 restaurants, then it's like, you know, what am I supposed to be doing? You know.
Interesting. And during that time,
So
I mean,
had
you're
good
at that
GMs,
point.
you know,
You're
for the most part.
right. And so, but I mean, I have to imagine that moving to STARR to do a similar role has got to be. I mean, is it overwhelming at times, like all the different things and responsibilities and focuses that a new restaurant takes on?
In my role now,
What's that?
in the role that I'm in now.
Yeah, so in the role that you're in now, I mean, when you're opening a new restaurant, I have to imagine that it can be like overwhelming, all of the different punch list items and things that you're focused on, no?
Yes and no. I mean, you know, we're a big company. We have a vice president of construction and facilities. We have a senior director of, you know, construction and facilities. We have accounting people and marketing people and finance people and creative people. You know, there's a lot more structure and support. So it isn't, you know, we have the critical path and we go by that, and we have punch list stuff, and you know, my role currently and the role of our team, because it's a team of 4 of us, we're basically the bridge between, you know, the construction guys who manage the GC and then who will eventually be the full-time operators. So we'll hire the GM, the management team, we'll train them, we'll hire the hourly staff. We're the ones that kind of inject that pre-opening training plan and culture. And then kind of once we get through what we call the review period is we start to peel back and peel out. And then let.
How long does that
kind of
usually
the
take?
GM.
Is that a few months in?
I mean, I think it depends. Generally, yes. Yeah. You know, if things are going well, it's a few months in.
Okay.
You know, we opened Bormini at the week before Labor Day, and I was there until about Thanksgiving.
Okay, got it. Is that an exciting part of your job? The fact that you have an opportunity to see new openings and it doesn't get stale? Like, does that feel good?
It's. I mean, that's the most exciting part. I think when you go into a space and it's like a cold, dark shell, and then, you know, a few months later, it's full of energy and life, and, you know, people having a good time and great products coming out of the bar or the kitchen. That's the coolest part. You know, walking through. Incredible. You know, we opened Osteria Mozza in Georgetown in November, and, you know, walking through that space that had been empty for like, you know, 6 years or 7 years, and to see it, you know, with like dust and plywood and shit on the floor, not literally, but stuff, you know, stuff all over the place.
No, I know, it's construction.
And then to turn into this, you know, gorgeous space that like Roman Williams and Nancy Silverton designed, and then it's like full of life, and, you know, the day that we're opening, there's like a line down the block. I mean, it's wow, it's wild. That's like the coolest part. You know, I know that Steven has this. You know, I've heard him in multiple interviews say like opening day is like the saddest day, because it's like all the stuff you put into it. It's, you know, the meetings and the vision and the design and the R&D and everything. Like it's over now. It's just like
now you hand it off to everybody else. It's theirs. It's the cities or the GMs or whoever's.
Yeah. Well, it really. I mean, with us, it really isn't the GMs. It's not the GMs till later down the road. But
until you hand it off.
Yeah.
Until you hand it.
But that's the coolest thing. Like to see like plans, you know, on like an OAC call, and to see plans and then to actually like see it like come to fruition is pretty wild.
It's pretty cool.
Like when we built El Presidente, it was this 8,000 square foot space with, you know, 40-foot ceilings, and I remember walking through. And then now, I mean, it's the same 8,000 square feet, but we like built a mezzanine, there's like this huge bar that Avrico built that's like it's like a diorama, and like you see pictures of it, but you don't believe it that's gonna actually be what this restaurant looks like, and it is. It's really incredible.
That is incredible. All right, and so I have questions about how the restaurant has evolved, but you told me you worked in beverage, so I'd love to hear about that quickly, and then I have a couple questions about that. So where did you work for beverage? What were you selling? Wine, liquor, both? What kind of company was it? Tell me about that experience.
So when I got burned out of restaurants, which was like 2018, I took a few months off, but I was invited to go to Spain and Portugal from an importer called Olé no Brigado.
Okay.
So, and I wish I had paid more attention while I was there, because the company I worked for ended up selling that book. But I went over there, and we were hanging out with like Antonio Massanita, and we went to Osborne, and we were in Ribeira del Duero, and Raul Perez, and like I was like, maybe I'll dip my toe in this pool. So I came back to DC, and I didn't want to do sales, because I'm not like somebody that would like close the deal, like ask my friends to like buy stuff from me, which my friends used to do to me that were in distribution. Be like, hey, come on, do me a favor, give me that wine by the glass. So that wasn't my shtick.
Yeah.
But Bacchus was looking for a field sales manager, and they had a really cool book. We worked with Vineyard Brands and
I like Dujac.
Bar Hill, Maison Ferrand, and we worked with Schramsberg and Ramey and Kane and Schaefer and Gosset and that whole book and Perrin and it was cool. So I managed the DC sales team. So I had 2 on-premise and 6 off-premise reps. So it was a whole different world working with suppliers and trying to motivate. It's a different kind of motivation, right? Like,
yeah,
I didn't know much about sales, but I'm like, these guys all were much more experienced than me, to try and motivate them and help them meet their sales goals.
Right.
I had some connections in the DC market in terms of on-premise, but I knew nothing about off-premise. I didn't know that sales reps merchandised and they put bottles of wine up in grocery stores, and I mean it's like a whole new world. It was interesting learning that side of it. I got a chance to represent Bacchus on a distributor trip to California. So Spotswood did this like conference, and I got a chance to go out there. And while I was out there, I went to some of our other winery partners. Ramey, Hansel, Schaefer, Kane, Bueller, like some really really cool things. But I did it for like 4 years or so, or 4.5 years, and
I can't believe you did it that long.
Yeah,
it's a different world.
Yeah, and I was covering.
World, right?
I had to furlough like 6 of my 8 reps, like whatever that was.
With
what
COVID,
was
like 19 and 20.
19.
Yeah.
So then I had to cover. While there was no on premise, we still had to like keep in touch with accounts. Like we tried to. We sold Riedel and Nestle products, which was Pellegrino and Panna. So we were like giving restaurants glassware. We were giving them bottled water, just to kind of help margins, and just so they would maybe think of us when things reopened to buy stuff from us. We didn't have big brands like Grey Goose or Joshua or Tito's or whatever. We had like smaller, more boutique-y things. But then it got to a point where like we rebuilt the team when things started to open back up, and I was like, this is boring. So there was nothing that was like that satisfying. What would I'd get like thrilled that like I made a wine by the glass placement? Like I didn't, whatever.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
I was salaried. I didn't like whatever.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
And I heard that that STARR was going to open some restaurants in DC, and so I reached out to them, and
And here you are.
Yeah, a month or two later, I was back. My first day back with STARR Restaurants was March 1st, 2022, which was the first day the mask mandate was lifted in DC. Which was
nice.
weird. Like I walked into Diplomat for my first retraining week, and I'd opened that restaurant in 2013, and I walked in and I'm like, I didn't know how to behave. Like, what do people on that side? What are they doing with COVID? And do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? It was weird. It was an adjustment coming back right after that that period that we all experienced.
What a crazy time. And I have to imagine, one of the things, I've never really got a chance to work in DC, but it's inevitable how politically charged the environment and just the aura of the place is. And it was just a crazy time. I'm sure those first couple months at Le Dip were fascinating. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it was it's weird. I was at the vibes in the city change constantly. When I was at Blue Dog Tavern, it was the Obama, and even Zaytinya, it was during the Obama administration, and they would eat out all the time, and then people would go to the restaurants that they would eat at just to say that they went to the restaurant where the Obamas ate at.
Sure.
And then when Trump was elected and then inaugurated, I worked for Michael Schlau, and there was all this build up for the inauguration, and it didn't really impact business a lot, except not positively, except there literally were some fights in my restaurants.
Fantastic.
Between guests, so that was new.
Perfect. Yeah. Now you have to be a bodyguard also.
But then then the week after the inauguration, you had the march, the women's march, and that was the craziest. We were gangbusters, open to close, that whole weekend. It was wild. Yeah. The vibe, and then now, to be completely candid, I'm kind of glad that I've been traveling, the most of this year.
Good for you.
Whether it was in Nashville or Philly or Atlantic City or wherever. Because it's weird. I was here Tuesday, and there was protesters and counter-protesters because of January 6th right outside the restaurant.
Fantastic.
So it's
gotta love that when you can't get to work because there's people protesting.
No, but that's
you know what? If I was ever a server,
people spend money.
If I was ever a server, though, I would love that excuse. There's protest outside. Going to be late for my shift again, Steve.
Yeah, right. The streets are closed. There's fights out in the in the mall.
So, Steve, you spent 30 plus years in restaurants. So, I got to ask you. So, how much has changed with the way that you manage? Because I remember back in the day, and it was expected that, of course, you got to be on time and all this stuff, but we had to be. I remember taking tests to apply for jobs. I remember I took a test to apply for the job at Barclay back when I worked for STARR, and it was just a much different environment. It was really competitive, and I'm not saying it's not that way now, but I have to imagine that the way you manage team members today is way adjusted from how you used to manage them even 10 years ago. What are you seeing in ways in staff? How do you motivate them? How do you communicate? How's things changed?
So it's a great question, and I think there's been a couple different waves of evolution.
Okay.
When I first started here, people I feel were it was almost like a different generation that worked in restaurants.
Yeah.
I think people were much more conscientious of of the rules, and of abiding by the rules. And I think the effort maybe was greater in terms of, learning the things you have to learn. And then there's a whole nother wave after COVID. So many people left restaurants because
Right.
the culture, you had the Me Too stuff, and that really started to change the culture in restaurants, and a lot of things that we would tolerate back in the day were not acceptable behaviors anymore.
Yeah.
And now, you have people are on their phones all the time, and punctuality isn't. Oh my, yeah.
I'm even you saying phone. I can only imagine my dear friend and my old GM Ed Doherty seeing somebody on the floor of the Capitol Grill with their phone out. We had to keep all that stuff in our lockers, and I can't imagine trying to pull somebody off their phone now. It's like a human right to have your phone. I feel like anymore.
It's wild, and just the and then if you try and hold people accountable, they think it's like a personal attack, or that you're being disrespectful to them. And it's like, do you remember during orientation, when we were all in a group together and you signed the thing that said, you're going to put your phone in your locker, and, we don't break stones about that. We understand, but it's don't be an ass about it. Right.
I can only, I can't imagine what it's like to manage these days, because there's just so much more outside forces, and oof.
You really have to, and people will leave at a drop of a dime. If someone feels that they're disrespected, and it's not that you're disrespecting them, you're just trying to, coach them.
Sure.
And they'll be like, oh, this isn't for me. And then they just won't show up the next shift.
I can't imagine leaving a job without having one set up. I get anxiety thinking about back in my life,
Did you just posted something on, I don't know if it was Overseasoned or about an interview with a guy talking to another guy saying can you imagine
Exactly.
leaving the anxiety of that anxiety, when I was a line cook, the anxiety was more I'm going to get fired because I'm doing a shitty job, not that I'm going to quit my job without another job,
Yeah, it's a completely different world, and I think probably in some cases it's for the better, but in a lot of cases it's got to make your job harder. I guess I'll just say that.
Yeah, it does, but I'm fortunate in that I don't have any direct reports really, and we try and establish that pre-opening culture, which you can never get back, right? Classroom training, the focus without guests around, without all the other noise, where you can really focus on training and teaching and coaching, and for whatever reason, pre-opening people are much more
excited, right?
Excited, they're enthusiastic, they're committed.
Yeah.
And then things will wane over time, but usually by the time they really wane, we're already we're already on to the next thing, and it's up to the GM and his team to really
keep
hold
the energy up, right?
Yeah, have enthusiastic pre-shifts and to get people excited and really drive that enthusiasm and excitement.
All right, Steve, so I got two questions left for you, and both of them will be interesting ones, I hope. Okay, so back when we worked together in the old world of restaurants, let's call it pre-2010, was really when I was in operations. I would say that the most important outward marketing you could have was getting a good review. The Craig LeBon Bells was a big deal, and of course you've got Tom Sietsma and all that shit, right? That everybody was just on the edge of their seats about waiting for the review to come out, and it could really make or break the restaurant. We didn't have to worry about Google and Yelp and all of these outside marketing forces then. So today, it's 2026 finally. What do you think has more of an impact, the social media and web presence, or the actual reviewers? And do the reviewers still have the same relevance that they used to have?
It's a fantastic question, and I never really thought about it much, but the way that we handle reviews, critics. Sorry, let me separate them because they're two different things, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So we handle critics in the same way that we would have back in 2010, 2012, 2014. You know.
Okay.
We have. There's like a process that we go through when we do have a critic in a restaurant. But we try and do things the way that we don't want to change things. It's not like you're going to have a different person cooking. Like the chef's not going to go and cook your steak because Tom Seatsman's in the restaurant. But we're just going to make sure that it's to spec. With different critics, I think have different weight. Like Seatsma, he just retired, but he had a lot of weight in the city still, and we'll see Elazar, who replaced him, who was a guy that worked for GQ. He's not doing anonymous. Tom would have, he would have aliases. He would use fake phone numbers. Like he would try and stay undetected,
under the radar.
Yeah, but same with Pete Wells or with Reichel or whoever.
Sure.
But now the new critics, and I guess it's a sign of the times, whether it's for the Times or the Post, the Washington Post, they're not trying to be anonymous now. Laban and Philly would use aliases, wink wink, as far as I understood.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's as secretive as he used to be.
Well, I mean, he likes to pretend like nobody knows who he is, but I'm pretty sure any restaurant person, and I'm not saying like just a fly-by-night server, but pretty sure me, you, and any one of our friends could pick out Craig Laban in a group of like 1,000 people very easily.
Oh yeah. Oh, I remember when we opened Washington Square, and Laban came in, like our Steve Scott or whoever the director was would call the other restaurants. We had so many in that neighborhood, and be like, "You guys got to come over here," and they would like hide behind columns to like get eyes on him, so they would see him. So when they came to their restaurants, they would be able to spot him.
Right, right. It's like Where's Waldo, but like that's really funny.
But I think Laban is still well read. We just had the review in Borromini, I mean, I would say he's still well read because there was just a slew of comments on his analysis of that restaurant post.
Okay.
Post review.
I loved how the city of Philadelphia and many of the comments that I read came to the defense of the restaurant and Steven Starr, and came to the defense. And you know what? Every once in a while, the old restaurant person in me comes out, and I just want to like destroy these guys because now I don't have a restaurant to worry about. You know what I mean? But it's gotta be a love or hate relationship. I don't know.
That was very satisfying because we put a lot of attention on trying to make the restaurant as great as we can, and
of course,
and menu would change all the time, and we're just trying to nail it for what the guest wants.
Correct.
And then to have somebody come in, I think with a predetermined opinion, which if you read it sounded like his mind was made up prior to him ever coming in, because we're a big company and it was a splashy opening and we spent a lot of money on the renovation and it was on Rittenhouse Square, and it's good that that, like what you said, like the people spoke, and the restaurant's busy, and I think it's great. I love it.
I'm probably going to go this week.
I think it's an awesome addition to Philadelphia.
I love it. All right, and my last question.
So we did something really interesting.
Yeah.
And so we took that review, and AI is interesting, and we uploaded it into chat and asked it to rewrite it in the voice of, or in the writing style of like Ruth Reichel, Pete Wells, Tom Sietsma, and it's super interesting exercise. I'll just say that.
Huh.
I'll share it with you sometime.
I love that. That's cool. It's cool what chat can do for you every once in a while. All right, so my last question, Steve.
And it said it was
your residence.
One more point on that. It said that it's like, he took 2 paragraphs to talk about like this one dish, and beat it up a little bit, and then he praised
the lasagna, right?
Yeah. He praised like 18 other dishes, but the way that he mentioned it was like in an afterthought.
Right.
And it's like, that doesn't seem.
I love this,
equitable.
and this, and it's the way that journalism has unfortunately changed for the worst, which is sensationalism and focusing on the negative for eyes. But I digress.
Gotta get the clicks.
I digress. And so my last question, Steve. You've been a lifelong restaurant person. You've been a culinarian. You've spent time in the back of the house. And I love what you said about how you guys did a deep dive into the crab cake. And you know what? I'm sure you're fresh off of having gone through all of the best crab cakes throughout all of the DC area. And since you have the insider's perspective, if you had 2 crab cakes, aside from the Occidental, of course, that you feel like are the best representations of Maryland's #1 export, what do you think are your 2 favorite crab cakes, non-STARR, that you would direct us towards?
I think they're both in Baltimore. One is at the Lock Bar, at the Four Seasons, which you wouldn't think of, but it's very, barely enough filler to hold it together. All jumbo lump, like the right amount of Old Bay, moist, broiled, so it's not like deviled or fried. And then the other, I would say, probably Jimmy's. Jimmy's is like the old school place in Dundalk, which is like a kind of a very industrial part of Baltimore. It's like on this, it's right off the highway. It's you wouldn't know the place. You would drive by it, you'd see a picture of a crab, but you wouldn't think that the place was any good. But yeah, I would say those 2.
You heard it here first. Well, Stephen, one, you've been a great friend for a long time. I'm happy to see that old school homies are still in the business, keeping it alive. You're absolutely crazy because you started out the interview saying you'd never doing an opening again, and now you've made a career out of it. So
I've done
you
like
don't have to tell me you're insane.
8
I
in the
already
last
know it.
3 years.
Exactly.
Maybe more. Maybe 10.
But it's been awesome to hear your story, man. I had no idea that you had back of house experience, and more importantly, so do you have any new openings coming up? What's next for you guys over the year?
So we are opening a Butcher and Singer / Occidental type steakhouse in the Bow Harbor Shops in Miami.
Okay.
In the spring. So we have Makoto is there, which is one of our higher grossing restaurants in our company. So we're opening there in March-ish. Do you remember Devon Seafood in Rittenhouse?
Oh, right. You guys are doing something in there?
So we're going to open, that'll open in the fall. We have Ken Falk doing the design there, but concept to be determined.
Okay, concept to be determined. Okay.
We can talk about it offline, but nothing's been announced.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I got to imagine it can't compete against Barclay, can't compete against Park, and it probably can't compete against Borromini. But there's no Mexican on that square. That would be my first instinct. But we'll have a little
we have El Rey
offline
around the
conversation. But all right. Well, you just said no Mexican. Thanks for clarifying. But
and then we also have, and this will probably be 2027. There's a new hotel being built in West Palm. So we're doing a pastis there, and we'll do something on the rooftop. So they're the next 3. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Steve, good luck to you, man. You got a busy couple years ahead of you with all the openings. It's always great to see you. I hope you enjoy your time in DC, and more importantly, thanks for joining the show. And as always, man, take care of yourself. And thanks for making sure that our restaurants are delicious to eat in, and that the service is good, and that the schedules are written, and that the people who operate them, have a good place to go work. I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. This was a pleasure.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
86 Reason Podcast was brought to you by Over Easy Office, outsourced bookkeeping solution.